Hello, everyone. A big, huge welcome to each of you, wherever you are in the world. And I know we have multiple, not just countries, but continents represented. And we'll certainly have more countries showing up as we move along together. But first, I wanted to welcome you to the Shakti Shiva Academy. I sense that this might be the first time connecting with us for some of you, and then some of you are known faces, and it's very exciting to be here with you all. So my name is Claire Rumore, and I am here in the San Francisco Bay Area, in Oakland, California specifically. And I'm excited to be co-teaching this class today with Stephen Tredrea. Stephen, you'll wave your hand so people can see you. And Stephen is not just in another country, he's in another day. So Stephen is over in New Zealand, and he is joining us from the future because it is around 5 a.m. tomorrow morning for him. So he's already in Monday, but the rest of us are in Sunday. And so it's great to be connecting all the time zones and all the places. But yeah, I'm so curious if folks would pop in the chat. Where are you? Where are some of you at? Where are you from? Where are you today? I'm very, very curious to see who's here. We've got Spain, we've got the UK, Chicago, Cape Town, France, Cape Town, Richmond, California, more Cape Town. So we have South Africa is here. Fantastic. And then Mallorca, beautiful, beautiful. So we're all gathered here today because we share an interest in, well, in the personal realms. So we share an interest in desire. We also share an interest in mysticism, in psychology, and in sexuality, and the intersections of these zones. And so that's what the Shakti Shiva Academy is about. We are a gathering, a learning community of intrepid explorers who are very, very, very interested in exploring those intersections of personal development, spiritual healing, spiritual growth, expansion, relational expansion, and then the mystical, the psychological, and then how sexuality can be used as a vehicle for awakening at all the levels. So before we dive into more, one of our main focuses at the Shakti Shiva Academy is what I like to call radical self-care. And so what radical self-care is, first and foremost, is making sure that you are comfortable. Are there any adjustments that you need or want to make to your body position, to your environment? Do you have something to drink nearby? Do you have, more importantly, something to write with today, because we're going to be doing some writing exercises? And do you have enough cushions, enough pillows behind you, enough warmth, enough coolness? So take a moment right now to take care of yourself. This is very, very important. If you want snacks nearby, if it's lunchtime where you are, that's totally great. Totally great. So take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. Do what you need to do to feel really, really good. Because we're here talking about desire. We're also going to be talking about why we don't let ourselves have what we really, really, really want. So let's practice it first right now by giving ourselves what we really, really, really want. So for me, that is a sip of tea. So get comfy. Yay. Well, as I mentioned, my name's Claire Rumore, and I am one of the two co-directors at the Shakti Shiva Academy. And I'm based here in the San Francisco Bay Area. I also spend a lot of time in Austin, Texas, and in Cape Town as well. And the Shakti Shiva Academy has two home bases. One is in the San Francisco Bay Area, and the other is in Cape Town. And then we have our reach going globally. And it's a real joy to get to connect with people across many different cultures, many different time zones, many different orientations towards life. And today's class is called A Tantric Approach to Desire, 5 Reasons to Embrace Your Desire and Exactly How to Do It. And so we at the Academy emphasize not just Tantra from a Neo-Tantra perspective, but we're very interested in a form of Tantra called Advaita, or non-dual Tantra. And a lot of our explorations are journeys into how to bring the dual, or that which is polarized, into more of an integrated state. And so that'll be a huge part of our exploration today, because desire and fear, or desire and taboo, are two very prominent polarities, two prominent dualities that we're all existing with, given the cultures that we have come from and reside in. And so for the class today, we're aiming for 90 minutes. But what we like to say is we're honoring the Shiva and the Shakti. So the Shiva, which is the, if we want to call it the masculine principle, or this more directed principle of action, likes to take things on a linear approach. So when we say 90 minutes, we want to honor 90 minutes for the container. However, the Shakti energy, the feminine principle, or this more kind of spontaneous energy, is a whole other factor. So how we like to honor the Shakti is that if at the 90 minutes, we still have a very vibrant and alive conversation going, then we'll make a pivot point for those who need to leave at 90 minutes. And then for those who want to stay, we'll keep going for another 15, 20, 30 minutes, depending on what the energy is like. So we like to honor both sides, but we'll make a pivot point. If we don't make an ending, we'll make a pivot point at the 90-minute mark. So I just want to let you know that right now. And then the last little bit of intro, especially to the Shakti Shiva Academy, and for those of you who are very new to it, is the Shakti Shiva Academy was created by a powerful teacher, a powerful human being, a wonderful woman named Shakti Malan, who Stephen and myself got to study with while she was alive. And she's a South African. This is a photo of her. And her energy was this type where, even though she had deep knowledge and a lot of notoriety and a lot of deep spiritual stamina for this type of shadow work, she was so real and so accessible. And her teachings weren't just something she was teaching, they were very much something she was living. And that's by far what drew me to her, was her humanness was so available to connect with, as opposed to her being on a pedestal or being unavailable or inaccessible. She created the Shakti Shiva Academy in 2017 and had already been teaching for a good decade at that point around the world. Sadly, she passed away in 2017, but we, the senior students, have been able to keep her legacy going. And her book, The Sexual Awakening for Women, is still available from Amazon. Beautiful work. And all of our courses are based on her teachings, including the upcoming Sexual Shadow Integration Work course. But Shakti set in motion these explorations of psychology, of mysticism, the spiritual, the sexual. And her aim in her own life was awakening or bust. She was ready to bust through limitations and fears and taboos, and that which kept her confined to a very narrow, conditioned reality. And she embodied and demonstrated that for all of us. And so now we are teaching to folks on 6 continents in over 35 countries. And we like to offer monthly, no-cost masterclasses and webinars like this one, so that we can come together outside of just the courses that we teach. And so we're really happy to have you here to be connecting with us. Now, before we engage more of the head, we want to engage the body. And the intention is to bring the body with us as we're navigating concepts and theories and ideas and philosophies. So take a moment to close your eyes and touch in with your inner landscape. Notice how you're feeling today, right now. Notice what's happening inside. Notice if there's stillness, if there's movement, if there's mental activity, if there's tranquility or anxieties, or whatever's there. Take a moment to welcome your state. Just kind of giving a little nod of acknowledgement to each thing you notice, whether it's some thoughts, some feelings, some images, some body sensations. And at your own pace, we're going to take a deep breath in for as many counts as work for you, and then hold it at the top for a count of 4 or 5. And when that count is complete, you can let the exhale just fall forward, fall out of your mouth, exit through your nostrils, whatever's comfortable. And then repeat that. Inhaling in, just very simply. And holding at the top for a count of 4 or 5. And then exhaling. And now give your right hand and right arm a little shake. Just shake out whatever's there, whatever's with you already, whether it's early, midday, or late. Just let the right hand have a shake. And then let that shake move over to the left. Let the left hand and arm have a shake. It could be just a little wiggle. It could be vigorous. Whatever's true for you. You could even have like a shoulder circling. You could match it with your right arm and hand now. Give it a shake, kind of shaking out the day, shaking out the night, shaking out the afternoon. Yeah. And then let that shake move to your left foot, your left leg. If you're sitting, if you're lying down, if you're standing, just give that a little wiggle, a little shake, as if you're like shaking off whatever's been on your mind, whatever's been distracting you, whatever's been bothering you, even whatever you're excited about. Just give it a shake. Yeah. And then let that shake move to your right. And let that leg and foot and ankle have a shake. Yeah, just give it a little wiggle, a shake. And now let it be a whole body shake. Whatever that is like for you, if you want it to be small and barely perceptible, or big, monumentous, vigorous, just let it all be here. This is to just kind of reset, clear the palate, open yourself up for newness and receptivity. Yeah. And now we'll get started. Just settle in. Yeah, let a yawn be there. Something to sip on. But apart from being the co-director, one of the co-directors at Shakti Shiva Academy, I'm also a coach, a counselor, and what I like to call a confidant for folks. And I love meeting one-on-one with people, doing coaching work. And I also love teaching. And I particularly love this work in non-dual Tantra and shadow work and emotional healing and exploration and in desire. And I met Shakti Milan in 2010, and that's when a huge part of my journey started, particularly as it relates to integrating this masculine principle and feminine principle within myself. And I'll be forever grateful to her for what I've learned. Yeah, that's enough about me for the moment. I'm in California, but I will now hand the baton over to New Zealand, to Stephen, and let him introduce himself. Stephen, share with us who you are, where you are, how you've come to this work.
Thank you, Claire. It's good to be here and to recognize some faces. My accent is South African, so although I'm in New Zealand, I am from South Africa. That's where I met Shakti many years ago. I've done a long journey with Shakti in my life, and Yeah, I'm in this beautiful place. Apparently Claire said you can hear the crickets in the background. It's early morning. I stay on a yoga retreat center where I teach meditation amongst other things. So I'm very excited to be getting back into this work. It feels like I've had a bit of a break from it for a while, and sort of been connecting in at the beginning of this year, and there's a lot going on. So yeah, thank you very much. One thing I just did want to add, and it's just something that struck me doing the inner masculine and a feminine workshop with some of you earlier this year, is when that was introduced, it's this idea that this sexuality is touching onto stuff that is triggering. It reaches into deep spaces in our lives, sometimes into very, very young and early parts, and that we, through this, just learn to, in addition to the self-care that Claire has spoken about, just learn to hold ourselves with compassion and also take responsibility, and to step into these things, be really willing to feel, and that's not that shouldn't be a violence. It should be a very gentle, loving thing where it's almost like we take our hands very gently into these sore and painful places that may come up, just to look at them and to do that with care and love. And hopefully the guiding that we provide will help facilitate some of that. Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen. And how today's class is going to flow is that we'll do the teaching piece next. So we're going to get a little conceptual, but we're going to have you follow along. And Stephen, if you would go ahead and put the link again to the chat for those who in the chat, this is to the workbook, the digital workbook that hopefully you already received, but we'll be following this along, and it's interactive, so you can write in the actual PDF. So we want to make sure that you have that. So we're going to explore this conceptually in the mental realms for a bit, and then we're going to have a time for questions, answers, discussion, conversation. And then we'll also be sharing a little bit about an upcoming course we have that is a continuation and a much deeper dive into this particular topic and realm. And so, yeah, pull up the workbook if you don't already have it, and we'll dive in. I'm going to turn it over to Stephen. He's going to start us with one of the key pieces of today, which is a whole different way to view desire, which is, it's not about suffering, it's about so much more. Stephen, I'll let you take it from here.
And it always amuses me to think desire is suffering. I mean, it's the words together don't make sense, but I know that when I was sort of reaching my late 20s, early 30s, I had what I call a quarter life crisis, and I went back and I reviewed my life from the 10 years from my 20s, and the one thing that I picked up on, and this was really the thing that brought me into this journey, was I was looking at what I was saying was my desire and what I thought was what I was moving towards. But when I was honest with myself, looking back, and I saw every time an opportunity came up to meet those desires, I was running in the opposite direction as fast as I possibly could. And that was an aha moment that said, there is something going on here that I need to look at. And this started this journey for me of starting to learn about my sexuality and my desire, and what was actually happening underneath that. So no, desire doesn't have to be suffering, yet sometimes our desires for some reason feel bad, and then we judge ourselves, or we self-criticize, or we keep it secret, which creates a separation from us and others, and then that can create a sense of shame and guilt and all these things, and all this sort of layering is not very supportive to the truth of who we are and our being. And it doesn't have to be that way. But the starting point into it is to go, okay, well, I mean, if desire is a good thing and desire is something that I'd like to be real about and be honest, and when you encounter people in your life who are honest about their desires, it, for me, certainly it's a incredibly refreshing experience, and certainly something that I would say I'm still aspiring to. We need to start by looking at what the fear is. So we're going to do just a little 3-minute exercise. If you've got paper or pen ready or somewhere to write, or even if you're going to just take this as a contemplation within, is to take the starting phrase of I fear desire because. So yes, we have desires, but when we're honest about what's happening underneath, and we pose the question, what is the fear? I fear desire because. So just write down whatever responses come up within 3 minutes. It'll take 3 minutes to feel into the fear that might rise when we consider truthfully and honestly what our desire is. And this is not necessarily sexual. This is desire for the fullness of life, desire for your truth and authenticity to shine through, to be expressed with totality in the world. What is the fear that gets in the way? Of you truly being who you are. I fear desire because. Okay, I think we're almost getting up for 3 minutes. Yeah. Okay, so I know that when I first started exploring with Shakti, there was a lot of resistance even to looking at some of my desires. So in the fear, what I fear desire because, what were some of the responses that came up for you? There's an opportunity to share. You can raise your hand and speak, or share in the chat. And what most surprised you doing this exercise? Okay, we've got Michael's got a hand up. Would you like to unmute yourself? Yeah.
I'm legally blind, so it takes me a moment to unmute. What came up was that I don't deserve to have them met, to have desires met, and that there's so much guilt and shame connected with desires, particularly sexual desires, but not only. And one other thing, just to share, I'm used to working with these issues with women, and with women facilitators. And when you started talking, Stephen, about your own sexuality, it instantly triggered just another level of my own sexual guilt and shame. A man talking about his sexuality. So it was just sort of an instant mirror for that those issues in me.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for sharing that. Yes, it's. I was in a conversation a couple of days ago, and we were talking about this thing that it seems to be for a lot of men that we really don't talk about what's happening to us. And there's such an amazing relief that can come up when we start to hear from other men that there are similar experiences. And even if that is just, yes, this is the guilt and shame that I'm feeling about my desire. And to express that is and be honest about it. It's a journey. Thank you. We had another question from Adam.
Not a question, just an addition. I think just it was interesting for me. I think sitting with the fear of it, and what came up was just the fear of the insatiability. That once you get a taste of a thing, it can be so overwhelming, and it can be any of the object of the senses, where you can get carried away with completely at the cost of all other things, and then a lot of the compassion and awareness that comes from being not following one's desires can fall by the wayside. So this is my
Yes.
experience of it at the moment.
Yeah. I remember doing this exercise. It's probably prompted by Shakti, certainly over the time that I was working with her, when I just went, okay, as I walk down the road or drive down the road, I'm going to allow myself to feel into the possibility of having sex with every single person that I find attractive that crosses my path. Like, actually engage with the possibility that this could actually happen. And the overwhelm of that as well was certainly something that came in quite strong. But there was a beautiful reality that emerged out of that. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Adam. Okay, anyone else have anything to share? And you're free to carry on putting stuff into the chat as we talk as well.
There's some excellent ones in the chat. I wanted to draw everyone's attention there. But yeah, let's let Prashant speak.
Okay, thank you. What always comes up for me immediately is the fear of the pain that may come from wanting something so deeply and allowing myself to want something so deeply. And at one point in my life, I was in a triadic relationship, and it was very deeply felt all the way around. And we got to a point where, I won't go into details, but it came apart. And the pain of that was so tremendous that it's the closest I've ever come to committing suicide in my life. And at the time, I realized, I knew, because immediately I went inside, that I had to make a decision, because being in that relationship was tremendously alive. And I am drawn to things that are tremendously alive. And I had to make a decision about whether I was going to close myself down or allow myself to possibly experience something like that again.
Yeah.
And eventually I made the decision not to close myself off because I didn't want to go dead. I didn't want to go numb. And that seemed to be the price I was paying at the time. So I didn't, but I also, that was a long time ago. And I'm at a different stage of my life at this point. And I just feel like part of me has fallen into a kind of numbness again. And it concerns me and it distresses me. And so, and the whole realm of sexuality is quite different for me at this point, at my age. And so it's a whole new world in a way. So, but the fear is still there. That was so intense for me. Obviously, it was so intense for me that I recognize, even though I don't think I'm shutting off or shutting down, that there's a part of me that's gone very quiet.
Yeah.
Very quiet. I know, the pandemic comes in there as well, but that has become very quiet. And I don't know how to, I just recognize that old fear of the pain has come up again after all these years when I thought I had moved away from it. And I had moved away from it, but it's coming back in a different form now.
Yeah, the fear of pain, the fear of loss, I think it's very real, and it contracts us, and and then we can have an idea in the mind, certainly, of how we want to be with this, but there's a subconscious layer. And I think this is what you've just expressed, is that you're noticing it. You're starting to notice, you're seeing that there is a subconscious part of you that has retracted, that is still afraid. And we do carry fear. And I know, I think I went through a similar journey where I just went, I can't stay in this state of contracted fear and avoidance and everything else. I want to be alive. And we will talk to that a little bit later, that aliveness. And this is the tricky part. So for me, it felt like it was just an on-off switch. I was either alive and feeling everything, or I was switched off. And it wasn't like something just I could let the pleasure come through only and avoid the pain. No, if I was switched off, everything was off. And so this has been my journey, just learning to notice, okay, the switch is off again. Can I just gently ease it up and just see what there is to be felt? Because if I'm not willing to feel it, I'm going to be missing out on this aliveness that you so beautifully spoke about. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, there was a mention in the chat, and the shares in the chat are fantastic. And thank you everyone who's put some shares in. There was one that mentioned, like a DTS, that mentioned, I fear desire because I get attached to the object of desire, and it's hard for me to let that go later. And this next section is about how we can shift from relating to desire, from the object position, from having objects of desire, shifting to being the subject of desire. And that doesn't mean being the subject of someone else's desire. That means being a vessel for the energy of desire as such to move through and circulate up and down and around and in and out. Sort of this spondic. If you've ever heard of the word spondic or sponda, it means perpetually self-generating. And so when we have an object of desire, we let our energy leave us. It goes outward. And there's not a right wrong about this. It's a what is. So that energy goes out and we attach, because that's the nature of that type of relationship to desire. We attach to the who, what, where, when that we want, that we're wanting. And we can get fixated there. And we lose our energy. We go horizontal, which means we start relating to past and future. Something that I want in the future, and I don't want it, or I do want it to be like something from the past. So we go horizontal when we're in this object relationship. But when we go subject, we stay vertical. And so we get to have the attraction to that person or that potential place to live or place to work or whatever it is. We get to have that here and near feeling, as Stephen said, allowing ourselves to feel all the sensations that come up. And then we're not fixating. And this is where desire can become problematic. It becomes problematic when we fixate on a specific outcome. When we're in the horizontal, we're very much fixated on a specific outcome. When we're in the vertical, not so much, because in the vertical, we're in the present. We're in the present moment. This other person gets to be as handsome or beautiful and delicious as they are, and I don't need to start a relationship with them. Like, I don't need that to happen. If it happens, or if we get to be sexual, if it happens, then all the better. Life just got a new experience to add to the tapestry. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't matter, because the energy of desire is still circulating in me as the subject of desire. So we talk about this a bit more in the workbook, so feel free to visit that there. But it feels so important to name this, because we're conditioned, and our physiology and our psychology, it trends us towards being in this horizontal object relationship, fixating on outcomes. But when we can shift that vector to being more vertical and being more in the present, then we get all the deliciousness that comes with this energy, that comes with these sensations and this momentum. And it doesn't have to disperse or get depleted or go away entirely just because something didn't happen the way we wanted, or just because it was actually disappointing and not how we thought it might be, or whatever your list of fears were. So visit the workbook for a little more depth on that and another inquiry question around that. But we're going to move into the 5 reasons that we promised you, the 5 reasons of how we can use desire as a vehicle for awakening, and 5 reasons to embrace your desires. So the 5 reasons are in the workbook. Today, we're going to focus on 3 of them. We're going to lightly mention number 1 and number 2, but we'll go deeper with 3 and 4, and then we'll complete with the 5th one. So I'll hand it over to Stephen to get us started, and then I will screen share the workbook.
Okay. So the 2, and these were in another call mentioned. There was a call a few days ago, and I believe that you're going to get a recording of that as well, so that you'll be able to get the content around that. But just to briefly mention what those first 2 are, the one is that it takes us to a resolution of the unconscious. I mentioned this briefly earlier, this sort of unconscious things that are impacting our lives but aren't seen, that we start to notice them and become aware of them, so that we can meet whatever it is and move through it, and it doesn't become a hindrance to the beauty of who we are. And the second one was, it makes our desire a place of presence, which is what Claire was just speaking to about being in the vertical, that we can really learn to enjoy even just the experience of being in desire without it needing to actually result in anything. And that is what it means to be in the present moment. There's no specific outcome. We are already there. There's nowhere to get to. We just have to be present with what's happening. Yeah, so moving on to the third one, and Prashant introduced this beautifully in her sharing, is that it can ignite the fire of our life force. And who doesn't want to be living a full, vibrant, exciting life and not be moving through it like a gray shadow of mediocrity and toning things down? You look outside into nature, nature's vibrant and alive and sparkling and diverse, and it's everything. And some of it, yes, looks ugly, but as I was saying earlier, you can't take part of it away. You need to take it all. So the fire of our life force, and the word fire comes through in quite a few teachings in slightly different ways. So the first is this concept of desire, of leading us towards something, of if we're aware of what that desire is and we move towards it, that it's going to reveal something of the unconscious and of our truth. But what's going to happen is, as we move towards desire, we're going to meet with some of the stuff that's holding us back. And the idea with that is, the more we move towards it and we move to it with some level of totality, and we really take it on and experience it and see what it's about, really mine it for all the unconscious messages, all the feelings that we have to be felt, it burns through in this raging heat of whatever's going on. And then there's a settling down that happens afterwards, where we get to see what's left. And it's the what's left that's very interesting and important, because it's what's not burnt away that is the true flame of our desire. And we refer to this in the workbook as the rippling blue flame. So one of Shakti's teachings also was that in building up desire, and this is where we get to the true desire that we want to sustain through our lives, as to what our purpose is, what our authenticity is, this real beauty of who we are coming through in each present moment as it is that we learn to slowly build up a fire that we can sustain, and that gives us the energy to go forward and meet our life with vibrancy and excitement, with tremendous amount of energy. And you've seen it, that it happens when you're excited about something, when something's moving you, when it feels good. There's this amazing abundance of energy, and we move into these beautiful flow states, where time seems to pass very quickly and things happen very easily, and it's a beautiful place to be in. So this is what the potential is of allowing our desire and being present with it, and starting to notice it, and starting to find the yes that'll lead us to that unleashing of energy and our potential as we experience ourselves in this manifestation. So we're going to do a quick exercise again, so get your pens and papers ready. Another 3 minutes. And the question with this one is, what would my life look like if I was willing to light the fire of my desire? How would it affect my relationships, romantic and otherwise? How would it affect my work? And how would it affect my day-to-day life? So an imagining exercise, if I was to really step fully into my desire, what would that look like in your life? 3 minutes. Certainly easy to numb out. But I know for myself it's not where I want to be. I have to keep reminding myself. And part of that is to look at this question. And yes, it might be frightening. What would my life look like? Okay. Okay. So if anyone has anything to share, you're welcome to put into the chat, raise your hand briefly.
Actually, we'll save these shares for the
We can
question and
save this
answer to make sure we
Alright.
have enough time to get to the other two.
Okay, then handing over to Claire for
Perfect. Hang on to
very
your
interesting
thoughts and your feelings and what's coming through as a response. And hopefully it will generate more conversation as we move along. Just want to make sure we have all the material that we get to cover. So moving on to number 4, it confronts us with our taboos. And so what we learn in this particular consideration, it confronts us with our taboos, is that a lot of what we're conditioned to see as acceptable to want is conditioned by the cultures, the societies, the tribes, the communities that we grow up around. And a taboo is actually something that is determined by a collective of people to be unacceptable or inappropriate. Often, and pretty much 100% of the time, but let's say 99.9% of the time, a taboo is not something that we determine for ourselves as a taboo. It's something that we were taught, that we were conditioned to see as a taboo. And so I'm sure you can think of various examples of things that in your own personal lived experience, you relate to that thing as a taboo. For me, having been raised Catholic and growing up with the heavy influence of the 10 Commandments and Catholic school education, you know, there would be something of thou shalt not covet, you know, someone else's spouse. You know, so that's a huge taboo in Catholicism, as is, let's say, a sexual interaction with someone of your opposite gender orientation, or sexual activity with someone of the same, wait, did I say that right? The sexual attraction to someone of the same gender orientation would be taboo. For some people, and you'll see it in the workbook, you know, there's the, if you eat meat and you're supposed to be vegetarian based on your cultural upbringing, or if you connect with someone who's outside of your caste or your class level or even your race, this could be seen as taboo. So when we're talking of desire, as Stephen mentioned way at the beginning, we're not just talking about sexual desires. Desires come in infinite forms. So for this next journal prompt, and feel free to type in the digital journal here, or write on a piece of paper. But the journaling prompt is, what's a desire, sexual or otherwise, that I judge myself for having? And what would happen if I didn't judge myself? Because as we dive into this, we start arriving at, well, is the nature of a taboo actually taboo for me, or is there something in there for me? For example, someone might be drawn to non-monogamous relationships, yet come from a culture that says that's taboo, that's not appropriate. And yet, is that my truth, that it's not appropriate? Maybe there's something for me to learn and experience, hence why I have a desire or motivation towards that. So this prompt is asking us to give consideration to what's something I'm judging myself, that I'm clinging to a taboo categorization for, and maybe that's not what's necessary. What would happen if I didn't judge myself? I'll give you a few minutes to think about this. And this question has me think that often we get frozen in our judgments, and we don't even think past or consider past them to what would happen, what would be possible if I didn't stop myself here. Yeah. When we get frozen, that's when that numbness happens. And that's when the vitality, the life force diminishes. So we'll go for another about 1 minute. And let yourself start to bring to a close whatever you're writing or wherever your contemplation has taken you. And let this question sit and percolate. And we'll get to explore it more deeply in our conversation Q&A bit in just a little while. But now on to our fifth reason for exploring desire. And Stephen will take us into that one.
So, awakening or bust. Speeds up the journey of our awakening, and Shakti Milan says, the quotes there on the screen, the only way to no longer be a prisoner of desires and fears is to face them, live them, immerse in them, and move through them. So when we're stuck, this is what we were talking about right in the beginning, stuck in the discomfort of it, our desires, the pain of our desires because of the longing or the fears or anything like that, we're really not free. And so every time we become more present with our desires and the stuff that holds us back from our desires, and we learn to burn through them, we start to drop all those layers that are keeping us attached to past, future pains or longings that aren't present, and we can stop all of that and just drop fully into the present moment, into just being completely 100% in this experience, this moment, this now. Then that's a freedom, and then we can start to be with what's real rather than what we're constructing perpetually in our heads as a fantasy. And really the epitome, I think, of this, some of you might have seen the pictures of the Tantric Temples in, I think it's in India, where they've got these beautiful, extravagant, elaborate imagery on the outside, these sort of sculptures carvings into the temples of many, many people and all these beautiful, elaborate forms of intimacy and sexuality, and maybe some of it's a little bit shocking. And the idea with these temples, so far as I understand, is that you go to this temple and you move around and you take in fully every scene that you're seeing. And you just keep seeing, what's my response to this? What's my response? Is it an aversion because this is a debut, or is this something? And maybe they're the same thing. Maybe it's very exciting. And to get to this point where you're meeting all of this until you can move around the temple and nothing's holding a specific charge that's keeping you from the present moment. And once you're in that place of deep presence, that is when you enter into the temple. And the temple inside, so far as I understand, is not quite so elaborately adorned. And this is the awakening process. So just to cover what we've been over in this discussion so far, we've spoken about desire not being about suffering, but about liberation and freedom. And that we can relate to desire as the subject of desire and actually experiencing it from this place, rather than going outside into the external, and become more present with the experience that we are. And it can ignite the life, the fire of our life force, and that energy that flows with it, and brings vibrancy into our experience. Confronts us with our taboos, the things that we judge, and in turn then judge ourselves, and brings us to a place of compassion, and it speeds up the journey of our awakening. Yeah.
This is a very rich discussion and introspection, and I hope that you're starting to get some key insights about your relationship to desire. And a few things we wanted to make sure you have as takeaways, apart from the 5 reasons to embrace your desires, to let them be, and to let them be a teacher for you. A few other aims we hoped to achieve today, or we hope to achieve today, is to take, one of them being to take desire out of the realm of shame and guilt. And I'm curious, how many of you were raised in a religious upbringing that had a lot of guilt and shame as part of it? Raise your hand. That was certainly my experience. Wow, we're at nearly 100% of the people I can see. Wow, that's a lot of us. Yeah, a lot of us. Thank you. So we want to help take desire out of this realm of guilt and shame, because again, guilt and shame are byproducts of conditioning, and they're also mechanisms that help us keep that wall of taboo kind of frozen in place to where we don't go past it to see what else is there for us beyond just the object that we think we're wanting, that thing, that person, that experience we think we're wanting. We fixate there, and then guilt and shame kind of lock us in place, and we don't go through or beyond. And so what we want to emphasize is the potency of desire, that every desire is actually a valid element of you and is worth looking at. And perhaps it's not necessary that that desire get fulfilled in the way that the mind is thinking it needs to be fulfilled. Nevertheless, there are ways to sit with and sit in the energy of desiring. You know, that energy of when you find someone new attractive, and there's so many unknowns, and there's such a mystery, and there's so much excitement about that. Well, instead of just horizontal, you know, from the horizontal, beelining it to that person and to create a specific experience, we can just stay in the vertical and allow ourselves to absorb and marinate in the joy of that attraction. That's a high level skill. That's a very advanced way of being. Nevertheless, it's what takes us closer to this state Stephen was talking about of our totality. And I want to talk more about the totality piece in just a moment to make sure you understand what we're talking about. But we also want to help you today understand the role of the shadow in desire. So you've heard of the Jungian notion, Jungian psychology notion of shadow. It's a part of ourselves that has been relegated to the unconscious. And so it's there trying to get our attention because what it wants is to be included into our totality. It's wanting to be part of the integrated wholeness of what we actually are when we're not in the human ego experience. And so the shadow is very useful. And taboo can be part of that seeming shadow. It's an unexplored, unquestioned, unaccepted part of ourselves. But what the shadow is trying to do, and this is what we teach at length about in several of our courses, including sexual shadow integration work that's coming up really soon, we look at how the shadow is a message. It's a messenger trying to point out to us a place where we're frozen in our wholeness, in our self-understanding, where we're frozen because of a trauma from the past. Like Prashant was sharing about the experience of being in a traumatic relationship that was very overwhelming to the nervous system. And then a freezing happened. And then there was no going beyond it until the resolution of that part. And so what happens when there's a frozen part is a shadow piece starts to come up. And whether it's sabotaging us from the behind the scenes or causing us to repeat patterns over and over again, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the shadow is actually a key element on this journey of liberation. And so, Stephen, I wanted to ask you to share for a moment about what is meant by totality and our totality.
Totality. I remember when Shakti first started speaking about totality, it was a very difficult concept for me to grasp. It's this being total, but she would also add the word being real, and you can add to that the sense of being authentic. So it's like the example that I gave of there was this time where I was in this sort of very uncomfortable desire of just of wanting to be expressing my sexuality and experiencing it, but because of the shame and judgment, I wasn't really allowing that to come through fully. So bringing totality into it was that exercise that I said is like, okay, I'm going to really accept that I have this desire to have sex with very many people. So, that's what's coming up for me. Let me not shame and judge it, and just allow that as a possibility. It wasn't that I was going to go and actually then try and engage with it necessarily, but I was allowing myself to feel it 100% completely, and to be honest with myself in that feeling, and to see what that revealed. And it certainly was very different to what I imagined, because when I practically did that exercise of allowing that possibility of having sex with whoever I wanted that I happened to encounter, the reality was that I actually just wasn't going to. and that settled it down. It just released it in the most amazing way. So that totality of I'm letting myself into the secret, letting myself into the desire. I'm being honest about it. I'm allowing myself to feel everything, and allow it to come up and see what is the truth that's underlying it, and can I be present with that too? Yeah.
Thank you. So we've shared lots of information with you today and just kind of fire hosed it at you. But we want to open it up for conversation now, for questions, for shares from what came through the journal prompts. Where are you at now in your relationship to desire? What is an aha or some insight you didn't have before that's come through? today. And feel free to share in the chat if that's more your style, and feel free to come online live. And Michael, it looks like you've got your hand up. Get the unmute going.
All right. Yeah. It was hard to go right to. Excuse me. It was hard to go right to what would my life be like if I allowed myself to experience the desire, because what came up instantly was such a deep sorrow at just all the life, love, and connection I've lost because of being so controlled by all the guilt and shame. This first really came up in this way about a week ago when the woman that I do shadow work with gave me some homework to each day for a few minutes just hold my genitals and allow in a feeling of wonder. But what came up instantly was this sorrow. And just a little background. Except for an experience with a very conscious prostitute a few weeks ago, I hadn't been sexual with anyone in 30 years. Since, because it was in my early 30s that the memory and a lot of the energy from just a really deep shaming around sex from childhood came up. And so it's, you know, it's, I know that it's in my mind that everything we talk about here is true, and yet there's still this place where there's still all this shame and guilt that's still in the way. I'm much more conscious of it and able to work with it than I was, but there's still all this sorrow here, and you know, and then the poor me gets attached to the sorrow, and I need to let go of that. But the sorrow itself is just so deep and so real. And but afterwards, when I went back to this today in this seminar, I was able to feel some energy of light coming in. So the road to desire is not completely blocked at this point. It's just convoluted.
Yeah, it could be like a wall of stones or bricks that a few of the stones or bricks get taken out at a time, and we can see through to the other side, even if there's not yet a big enough opening for us to cross through. And it sounds like some of those stones and bricks removed themselves, or you removed them today and this week with these powerful experiences that you took on, and very vulnerable experiences when we're confronting our conditioning, and then the taboos that are part of that, and then the lost time or the perception of lost time and lost experiences. You know, it can be really heartbreaking when we sit with that and behold it and let ourselves have the experience.
Well, one other quick thing with this. The other thing that came up with that exercise of holding my genitals is still such a deep level of self-hate that I've carried my whole life, focused on my sexuality and even my sexual organs, you know, that comes out of that childhood experience. So that's just another of the large obstacles that I'm still working through.
Yeah, and I'm certain you're not alone in that. That's a really big one. And as Stephen said early on about holding ourselves with the deepest of compassions, because this journey, this human experience can be very challenging and have various elements that are really painful. So Michael, thank you for your vulnerability and for sharing so deeply. Really, really grateful. Thank you. Who
And
else
I'm
is...
just going to jump in.
Yeah,
Jump in
please,
quickly. I
Stephen.
just wanted to add something there. This thing around sorrow. Just to say that grieving is so valid, and I've found for myself that to allow myself to grieve, and I've also been through. I've got a very strong thing of the self-hatred and loathing that comes up as well. But those times when I allow myself to go into the grieving deeply, invariably feel like one of the most loving experiences, self-loving experiences that I've been able to possibly give myself. To really acknowledge that pain and that loss, and I've gone into it and I've suffered it, and I've been very wary not to get critical of myself in the suffering of it, but just to see it as, no, I'm honoring a loss here, and this was real and it was painful, and there is a real grieving process that we go through that is valid. I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you. So true. Yeah. What else is percolating for you in your own journey and relationship with desire? I'm curious. Yeah, Tracy, looks like you have your hand up.
I don't know what my internet connection's like, so I'll just say that first. But yeah, I had a bit of a traumatic experience where I followed my desire for someone. It was a taboo relationship because the person was married. And then, I mean, it was wonderful. It was so heart-opening and really kind of felt deeply connected and felt very, which is a bit unusual for me, felt very sure of my desire, not just my sexual desire for this person, but just the heart-openingness. And then, of course, I ended up getting threatened and just all sorts of, shit, basically. And when I'm doing these exercises, I realise I've never really recovered my desire. It's very difficult for me now to feel, not sexual desire, that was part of it, and I feel like I've recovered that to a degree. There was a lot of grief sitting tightly around my heart, tightly kind of around my yoni and my womb, and I did a lot of sort of grief work with that, which was beautiful to do, really. But I still feel I can't tell what I desire in any part of my life. I find it very difficult to find that flame, or even get a sense of knowing what I would like or what I want in any kind of aspect.
Yeah, it sounds that there's still some frozenness from that traumatic experience, even on the other side of the grief work and the shadow work, that there's still a bit of residual kind of shutdown or kind of a hypo arousal, a closed inness, understandably, because that had to be very, very scary. Even though maybe your life wasn't threatened like a tiger about to attack you, the feeling can still feel the same way to the nervous system, and it doesn't know the difference. So there's a clenching that maybe has relaxed in some parts of your being, but is still clenched in others, and makes the signal from, from genitals to heart to head of what is your truth. It gets a little jagged and distorted because of the clenches and blocks that are still there. And so I want to acknowledge you. Like, that's a very difficult experience. Any type of trauma, for regardless of where it came from or how it came about, is very difficult to have in the nervous system. It affects all areas of our lives. And yeah, so again, having that gentle compassion, gentle, all-encompassing compassion for yourself. Like, okay, this hasn't resolved itself all the way in my life. I honor my journey. I honor my pain. I honor my present moment, and what else is possible. And a piggyback piece I wanted to highlight. It's one of the trickier parts about desire. Again, moving from object to subject. A lot of times we get confused because we think our desire is about that object. Again, person, place, experience, doesn't matter. But we think our need, our experience is about that external thing. Whereas as we go along, we realize that the truth, more truth is that object is representing something to us, or to our psyche, to our unconscious. Often it's representing a part of ourself that's in the shadow. And to give a personal example, I also found myself at one point in my life very attracted to someone who was married. And as I sat with my feelings about it, I realized it wasn't actually about this person. My attraction was not about this person, despite them being very attractive, very handsome, very talented, delightful. It wasn't about him. It was actually life trying to point out to me that there were qualities this person possessed and expressed that I wasn't owning or tapping into myself. And so, for example, this person was extremely creative, very musical, very artistic. And those were parts of myself that I wasn't owning at the time. So I had this realization that it wasn't about me trying to start a relationship with this person or be sexual with them, even though a part of me very much wanted that. But it was actually about me recognizing this person is representing to me the creativity that I'm not allowing into my life. And it's time for that to be my focus. And that was a huge, huge realization about the nature of desire. So again, however our path takes us, there's no right, wrong, good, bad about it. There's merely what is. And we collect the jewels of insight as we go along. And so Tracy, I really want to honor your journey and your path. Yeah. And did you have any more you wanted to share, Tracy? Can't tell if you're reaching for the unmute. Anything to feel complete?
No, my internet keeps dropping in and out and
Oh.
slowing down. I don't know if it's like that from your end either. No, that is interesting, because actually sometimes I've got a deep desire which is based in childhood for freedom. So I can kind of see, you know, as well, that there's like desires that are kind of mutually kind of I need to find a way for those to kind of some kind of harmony here, you know. So I can kind of see that that's an issue for me. And yeah, had some dreams where I've set off in a kind of quite desirous way for something, and then shrunk back and kind of you know, pulled back in the dream with other dream people going like, get her back in here. So, you know, yeah, it's definitely still, I think, in process, and I'm working kind of consciously with the body tension and stuff like that as well. But thank you, thanks for your share on that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. At the end of the day, when we speak of totality and when we're exploring desire, the aim is to learn how to let illusion and fantasy drop away. And pretty much, again, 99.9% of the time, whatever we're finding ourselves drawn to outside of ourselves is us relating to fantasy and illusion. Because do we ever really know the other person or place or phenomenon or whatever it is? No, we're not actually interfacing with the realness of that other. We are interfacing with our projections, our past, our overlays, our conditioning. And that's who we're shadow boxing with. That's who we're having our relation dancing with. So when we can stay vertical it allows the illusions to drop away. And then we have more of our realness and presence available to interface with the realness and presence of the other in all their perfectly imperfectness. So, yeah, looks like Jesse, you've got a question.
Hi.
Hello, hello.
I don't know if I have so much of a question, just kind of just expressing just excitement about this. What I'm seeing is like a merger of the spiritual and the sexual aspects of growth and insights. I've come from like kind of a journey of like being over I don't know, I think giving myself too much permission in sexual desires and seeking out the objects of sexual desires. And that had caused a lot of failed relationships, a lot of trouble and problems in my life. And to the point that I kind of shut down sexually, kind of turned my back on my sexuality and had another sort of failed, like, you know, shot at that. But I was always kind of confused about like my sexual desires and their potential destructive nature, even though they seemed so appealing and so like, you know, well-intentioned in my mind. So when just recently, I think I've you know, really turned to sort of spiritual development. And after a failed relationship, I kind of was just kind of sick of tending to my sexual desires and sort of just abandoned them and really focused on spiritual growth. And what I found was there's just an absence of conversation around sexuality in a lot of these groups and a lot of these teachings. I mean, it's been fantastic. And I feel like I've learned so much about myself, my emotional and spiritual like world. And I feel like I've grown so much, and I'm so grateful for these insights that I've learned. But I have to admit that I've wondered and questioned, like, where does sexuality fit into all of this? Because it is so real, and it's still, you know, and I honor my sexuality now. But I feel like there was a time I look back and I even read something where like I had written about like kind of like really being I feel like I was also almost cursing my sexuality, like telling it to take a back seat, and like you're no longer you're no longer driving this vehicle. And now that I'm coming into this point where embracing it, and also filled with lots of sort of these you know, motivations for spiritual and emotional and, you know, growth, and having this, wanting to include in this balance like sexuality, deeper understanding. This is exciting to see the partnering of these, like you're talking about shadow work, and you're talking about past trauma, which I've been dealing with a lot, like in different works and different like sort of practices. To find that there's room for that and sexual desire is exciting for me. I don't really know exactly what it's going to look like, but I'm excited to sort of delve into that and see how you know, this shifting of the lens from object to subject, and you know, retaining desire, honoring desire, without you know, jumping straight into action, or like you said, beelining towards the object of your desire. A lot of things, I'm sure, but I'm just excited. So thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, truly. And what I'm interested in, and what we as a community here are interested in, is those intersections of the shadow. You know, that's the mystical, and then the psychological would be the traumas and the past's influences and conditionings, and then the sexual, like our past, present, and future sexual selves and sexual experience beingness. There's a lot that's there, and when we decompartmentalize them and act as if or pretend that they aren't interrelated, we're doing ourselves a disservice. So one of my huge interests is exploring these intersections, the intersectionality of all of this. And then an image came to mind as you were talking. There's a tarot card in a deck called the Thoth deck, that part's not so important. But what's important is the image on this one card in particular, and it's called the Lust card. And the image on the Lust card is a big ferocious lion. Think of that as the power of our sexuality. And then there's the figure of a woman, the figure of a human, riding on the back of this lion because she has tamed it. She has not forced it into sublimation, but she's tamed it because she's come into oneness with it. And another version of this card is the lion's there with, and its mouth is pried open by this woman or this human, and she has her head inside the lion's mouth, and the lion's not going to snap her head off because she's at one with that. And so that's the image that was coming through for me as you were describing where you're at and where you're going. And I feel there's quite a bit of that awaits you. You're on the journey of taming the lion, your lion. And it's very powerful.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yay. Well, let's take a pause right now, and we'll continue after the 90 minutes for those who would like to stay on and go deeper. But right now we want to take a moment to share with you more about this course of ours that's coming up really soon. And whether it's the time for you to engage a course like this now or in the future or not ever, it's still a really interesting course that I think you'll want to know about because the subject matter is so rich. And so Stephen, if you could screen share some information, and then I'm going to put into the chat the website of where more information is at. And so the website is sexualshadow.com. And this is where you can find all the details about our course called Sexual Shadow Integration Work. And so let's see, I'll move those pieces so we can see everything perfect. So here, the course is starting next week, and Sexual Shadow Integration Work, it's a 9-month course where we systematically journey through different categories of fantasies, of desires. And a big part of the first module is discussion about desire, like we've done today, of why our desires are important to our awakening and integration process. How our desires and our fears and our taboos can help us bridge, the divine realm and the human realm into a blended experience, an integrated oneness experience. And as we journey through each of these categories of fantasy and desire, whether they have to do with youth, innocence, virginity desires, or the desire of having sex out in public and being seen, or desires around kink and control and domination, submission, and on and on and on. There's a number of categories we explore and engage. And the intention is to, like Stephen was sharing about that Hindu temple, where on each little section, there is a different scene, a different fantasy depicted. Some will absolutely turn us on. Some will repel us and cause us disgust, which is also a reaction that puts us into fear as opposed to desire. It polarizes us. Some will be like, meh, not so interested about. Again, that's information. And so what we're doing is sort of walking you around the temple. And what I like to say about this course, and I've taken it twice and I've now taught it twice, is that this is a journey to help you generate more realness and more presence in your living, your loving, and your love making. And that's what this course is all about. We're systematically, categorically peeling back the layers of fantasy. And this is not because fantasy and desire and things we're drawn to are bad and wrong. This is merely because they can block us when we fixate on the external of them. Well, how I like to say it is when we're exploring, let's say the color red, let's say that's, a desire to have sex in public. If I can only imagine being sexually turned on because I'm being voyeured, then I'm limiting myself. It's as if I'm only painting or coloring with the color red. Everything is red, everything is red. And I'm cut off from all my other colors. And so what we do is we dive into, well, what's in that red for me? What's in that desire? What's in that fantasy for you? And we peel back the layers. And then as Stephen was sharing in his examples, there's a softening that happens. My fixation on red starts to relax, and I can put red back in the crayon box and pull out orange next, or purple, and start exploring, with the intention being that I have access to the full spectrum of colors, not just one or two or none or whatever it might be for me. So this course is very powerful, and it's a deep dive into these realms. You can read all the different details on the website. You see we have 4 different faculty members, myself and Stephen, and Rianne, who's the other co-director at Shakti Shiva, and Lisa, who's another senior faculty member and longtime student of Shakti Milan's. So we're intrepid sexual shadow explorers, and we'll be journeying with you on this 9-month course, should you choose to engage it. And then we also have other offerings that engage this material that we have throughout the year that aren't as intensive as a 9-month, but this one's particularly powerful. And I want to share a secret with you. And this secret is only about today's offering. The price here is $24.95, which is our full price. But the secret is we've actually set the registration page to offer our early bird pricing through the rest of today, through the rest of Sunday, until midnight California time. And that is a $500 discount. And so we're not advertising that anywhere, and I didn't even know about it. I found out about it earlier. So I wanted to share that secret with you in case this is an opportunity that's of interest, that we still have our early bird pricing available to the end of today. But, and then you'll also receive a discount next week for the full price. That's not as generous as the $500 discount, but it's still a wonderful discount. And so that's our share about the course. Stephen, would you like to talk a little bit about your experience with this material?
Yeah, I think the one thing that's coming up for me is that this is massive work. This is huge. This has changed my life fundamentally. I was not the same person that you're seeing now before I started this work, without a doubt. It's been an amazing journey. It's been very challenging. And I think the part that I wanted to highlight is that this is a journey of authenticity. It's a journey of power. And it's not easy. It's not, desire sounds like this fun, exciting thing, or I need to sort of temper that down. We're really going into some challenging work, and part of it is what we encounter within ourselves, but part of it is also what we're going to encounter in the external. And the more that we start to step into our authenticity and power, we become less identified with the narrative that we're given and find our own truth in it. We are going to encounter an objection from the external. So it is to bear in mind this can have an impact. You need to be aware that not everyone is going through this journey with you necessarily. On the retreats that I did with Shakti, and this actually specifically came in from her teacher Rahasya, we would start off the retreats with this phrase, and I can't remember the exact wording, but it was something along the lines of, I give you full permission to, be in your authenticity and truth, however that looks for you, even if it's absolutely terrifying for myself. And the reality is that outside in the world, people aren't giving us this permission. We've got to take it, and this is part of stepping into your power, stepping into authenticity, and owning who we are and what our pleasure is and what our excitement is, and this energy that we open up, how that then wants to be expressed out. And yeah, as I said right in the beginning, and Claire highlighted this as well, it's not necessarily a sexual thing. We get a lot by tapping into the sexuality, and it's certainly a tremendous life force, vitality, and energy that moves through us. It's creativity and it's power. But how that looks when it starts manifesting out in the world could be very different, because you'll start to tap into really where you're aligned in your being, and that's beautiful. And I think we're all very beautiful beings, and there's so much to explore, and so much to enjoy and be a part of. And I look forward to sharing that. Yeah.
So thank you, everyone. We want to mark the time right now for anyone who needs to leave. And we want to extend a deep thank you to you. And we'll be sending the recording and the follow-up within the next 24 to 48 hours. And again, more info can be learned at sexualshadow.com or at shaktishiva.academy. And so for anyone who would like to stay on for a little bit, now we just want to relax and be informal with you and share questions, share conversation. Thank you. And just share with us what's on your mind. What's your experience been? And yeah, what's there for you? Helen, thank you.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi. I wondered if you could give me some guidance on something, because what is coming up for me at the moment a lot is like the serpent. So, and I'm not entirely sure what that is all about in reality. So I'm attracted to the rings that are, the snakes, and even sometimes when, like you mentioned at the beginning, just relax and whatever, I'll see like the head of the serpent. So, so that's one thing. And the other thing is the concept, I'm not entirely sure if you've heard about it, which is the reptilian, yeah? So have you ever heard that expression?
Reptilians as in alien life forms, or that type of...
Yeah, reptilians as people, and then their eyes kind of change into like reptilians, right?
Yeah.
And I seem to attract that type of character to a certain extent, which is very enigmatic, but they're very cold. They don't create any type of commitment. I don't know, but if they're with you, they're fully present and very loving, very sensitive, but then woof, they can cut you off like that. So yeah, so those two things. So if you could give me some info, that would be amazing.
This info, what I will share with you, is strictly from my experience and contemplation. It's not necessarily a universal truth, but the snake tends to be symbolic of Kundalini energy, which is the sexual life force energy that we were talking about, that gets awakened with desire. And in tantric manuscripts and in other teachings, the snake is depicted as moving up the spinal column. And so you could think of that as the movement of the snake is what awakens our chakras, our energy power centers. And typically the snake, if you are seeing the snake, being drawn to the snake, drawn to the symbology, I suspect that it's indicating a Kundalini awakening in you, an indication and an invitation to move more of your focus to the sexual, particularly the conscious sexual realms, whether that's through study, practice, embodiment, so forth and so on. It's basically to take it more seriously in your life. And the third thing it could represent is that you are, how to put this, you may carry the thread of the sacred prostitute, which is an archetype that owns her sexuality, that owns, and again, this is not specific to women, but the sacred prostitute owns their sexuality, owns their sovereignty, and owns their realness, their authenticity. And sexuality is a big part of that for the sacred prostitute. So those are my thoughts about the snake. In terms of the reptilians, reptilian people may or may not exist. I've heard about them and have probably encountered them and probably lean more towards believing they exist than not, but I don't know. But what comes forward for me for your consideration is that if you're drawing to you reptilian type folks, there could be, life could be asking you to consider ways that you also are a reptilian, Because if you're drawn to snake, there's the sacred part of the snake, and then there's also the primal part of the snake, which attacks, which has prey and goes after it, which squeezes someone to death, which can be cold and calculating. So that's also part of the snake. And so life may be asking you to own the ways. Again, this is not about right or wrong. This is about what is and owning, meaning accepting, allowing, loving what is. So owning the more reptilian parts of yourself. Where are you cold, calculating, able to cut someone off or cut yourself off in a heartbeat and change direction very quickly and not have emotional capacity for commitment and be resistant to true deep intimacy? So that's my little would be to give consideration to that, because we tend to attract in what we need to own about ourselves, the good, the bad, the ugly. And yeah, how does that land for you, Helen? Does that resonate?
Absolutely, and thank you ever so much. I'm just really happy because obviously I've been thinking about these, how do you say, concepts, and yeah, so what you said is just amazing. Thank you ever so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yay. Well, we're open for questions or shares. Adam, looks like you've got something.
Hi, thank you so much for this introduction, and so nice to be in this kind of space. It's very much what I've been opening myself up to, and after I think a lifetime of being fascinated in matters of sexuality, and this desire for the transcendent power of sexuality and this ability to go from duality to non-duality. There's that underlying kind of aspiration in so much of what I see myself and others doing, like this wanting to go beyond the frustrating limitations of being separate, but then being so misguided in the way that we try and achieve this state of transcendence, or that often it's kind of more like escapism. We kind of use the objects of it, our desire, as a means of escape and distraction and dumbing, or like just losing ourselves essentially, rather than finding unity or finding ourselves. And so if I can just so having worked in many different ways with this, mostly within a Tibetan Buddhist context, I just specifically more practically relating to doing the 9-month course with you guys, I'm kind of interested in how, I mean, just some more details of how exactly the course would play out in each month. And so I have an idea of how much time I'd be, giving towards it, and how much time I'd be getting from it. And then I think also the sense of, like finding ways of making that transition for me, because it's been a radical shift. Like I think a lot of the shadow work for me is like moving away from that object of desire approach, which for me very much is like manifested as pornography addiction. I think it was very much like, it's like this insatiable need, this is like insatiable, and then losing the spiritual and the transcendent power of sexuality as a result of that objectification. And having just recently, for maybe this last 5 or 6 months, like having gone beyond that fixation on the object, I'm finding the transition. Yeah, it's like I'm in withdrawal really, and then I'm being cautious to not fall into another set of addictions. Like I find myself just wanting to transfer that addictive nature onto something else. So hence my interest in the course. So just a little bit, more in that direction.
Thank you for your questions. Absolutely. So the pragmatic side of things, the course itself is contained within 9 months. It has 9 modules, so 1 module per month. And each of those modules, as mentioned, is focused on a different category or theme around a sexual fantasy, desire, type of pornography, some kind of activation of our eroticism. We want to unpack those alongside looking and exploring into trauma and into the influence of taboos and our conditioning and things of that nature. We weave throughout. And so in each month with the module, we have 2 different teaching classes. And the teaching classes are this format. So 90 minutes with a pivot point extension to 2 hours if the energy is there. And then there's a little bit of teaching on the module. There's sort of the expectation that you'll have read the module or at least looked over the module before the class so that we can get right into rich discussion and practical, kind of the practices and things like that. So if you wanted to play full out, that would be 3 to 4 hours of live classes per month with additional 3 bonus classes happening every 3 months approximately. And those are also about 90 minutes to 2 hours. And then we offer a study hall every trimester. So at the end of every 3-month segment, we'll do a study hall, which is coming together in a very informal way to talk about the 3 modules, where someone feels blocked, breakthroughs they're having. If someone just needs time and accountability to do some of the assignments, they can use the study hall for that. They don't have to participate in the discussion. We do a little bit of live coaching. We do a little bit of live coaching on all the calls. So in terms of live Zoom interactivity, that's what's there. About 4 to 6 hours, depending on the month, per month. And then the module will go out at the start of the month. So you'll have the whole month to look it over. And then we'll have homework where you can interact through our forum, which will be on Mighty Network. And so you add your contribution into the forum segment, and then people can comment and you can comment on other people's entries. So if you're wanting to play full out, it could be upwards of, 2 to 4 hours per week. Again, we don't like to make any of our coursework feel like work and demands and a burden, because that's not going to help the process. I remember when Shakti first offered this training, it was condensed into about 8 months, but it was actually a 13-month course that we did really, really fast on every 3-week segments. And it almost became a part-time job for me in terms of the time it took up, but I wanted to be on a fast track and really engage the material. So we try to make it more spacious. And I always say, go with what's drawing you, set aside what it's not time for right now or what you're not interested in. There are segments of later totality or later shadow work that just I couldn't relate to, so I didn't engage them and I set them aside for a while. So do what you feel drawn to do, pace yourself, and first and foremost, determine what your intentions are. And that will inform how you interface with, engage the course and how you benefit from it. Did I leave anything out? Let me know if you have any other questions, Adam, or anyone about the practicalities of the course. But we like to come together in this setting. And I know it's Zoom and we all have Zoom fatigue galore. Yet apart from all being in the same place at the same time, this is a fantastic way to get to interact together and bring all our perspectives together. So we keep with it until we can do in-person events again. But yeah, it's an exciting course. The people drawn to it are high-level folks like yourselves, ready to engage at whatever level they're called to. But the fact of the matter that they're drawn to a subject like this already indicates a high level of willingness to live big. And Prashant, I see your hand.
Yeah, I mean, what you're offering is wonderful and needed and unique. I'm in this place in my life where spiritually, my spiritual work is involving a lot of what I call unwinding and stepping away quite consciously from identity, past identity. And the reason I bring that up is because the whole process of doing that is affecting every aspect of my life. And I am muddling around in a lot of not knowing because I don't want to do what I used to do. And I just feel like my whole focus is moving into a different place that I haven't experienced before. So I've been aware of shifts away from my sexual experience of the past. And for me, sexuality consciously has been a path of spiritual growth for me. So, and I have no problem with that. And it's been very rich. And I'm not experiencing my sexuality in the way that I used to, aside from the fact that I'm older now. And it seems like my body isn't controlled by hormones all the time and the imperatives of the chemical realities of that time of life. But I've sensed for a very long time that there's a whole different way to experience my sexuality that I don't know how to describe in words. And I'm, oh God. I've kind of had to set up a curriculum for myself, you know, through the years, because most people were not doing the work that you're doing here. Particularly early in my life. So mostly I've had to bring those experiences and perspectives myself because there were no courses involved. And now, and for quite a number of years now, I've sensed that I'm moving into a new territory for myself. And I don't see no one's addressing this both spiritual shift of unwinding and being in the unknown, but particularly specifically in the realm of sexuality, of what I have sensed where it's going for me in a way, but there are no books about it, and there are no guides. And so I'm muddling around in that part of my life, like I'm muddling around in all the rest of my life because of the spiritual trajectory.
So the thing to note is that anytime we step out of convention, anytime we're stepping out of tradition or what we've been conditioned to think, do, believe, we're stepping into the unknown. And when we let identification drop away and think of those as the conditionings, as the influences that we've been taught to believe in, when we let that drop away, then we're stepping into the unknown very naturally. And when we enter certain phases of our lives, that's happening or going to get sparked. It's a very natural part of a personal evolution. And so you're right, there is a lot of mystery and a lot of groping that is part of this journey, because so many of us for so long have been censored by taboo, by conditioning, by influence. to even speak about any of this, of what we're experiencing, of the mysteriousness and the not knowing that we're existing in, and how difficult that is. And it's been a bit of a taboo to even bring up topics like that historically up to this point. And so now there are pockets of liberation happening when groups like this can get together and be very real. Like, this is hard for me. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what's next. What I used to know is no longer applicable, and things are not looking how I'm familiar with them looking. So WTF.
I just don't know how to function in this place. It's like all the signposts and guideposts that I've created for myself or have stumbled across by myself, etc., are not here, even in the group that I am part of for the spiritual, as if one can separate spiritual and everything else. But, that seems to be, I have found a kind of home for that. And it feels to me like I'm where I'm supposed to be, even though I don't know where I'm going. I don't know where I'm gonna wind, but I'm in this is the next step for me. So that feels right. But nobody in that group is dealing specifically with sexuality.
Right. And lots of groups do avoid it. And just for the sake of time, I want to extend an invitation to you, Prashant. If you'd like to reach out to me, I would love to continue this conversation with you and explore it more deeply.
All right.
Because it's an important one. And you're not the only one recognizing and realizing this topic is not being talked about.
I kind of assume I'm not out here totally alone.
Yeah, no.
And I don't think anything in my life's accidental. So the fact that you and your work have shown up at this point is not an accident.
Well, let's continue the conversation, and I would love to speak with you more. Yeah,
how do I contact you?
I'll put my email in the chat for anyone who would like to reach out. And Stephen, if you would like to do the same also, if anyone would like to reach you, then you can pop that in the chat. But yeah, for anyone who would like to have a chat, even about the course, to make sure the course is a fit for you, or if you have questions that we didn't answer today, feel free to reach out. Happy to answer anything and be with you. Yeah, before we depart today, it would be so wonderful if you'd pop in the chat how today was for you. How was this webinar? What did you learn? What are your takeaways? Yeah, just what's starting to open up. We talked about a number of things that include that desire. Doesn't have to be about suffering, it can be about liberation. We can relate to desire as the subject of our desire. And we talked about our 5 different reasons to embrace desire, and the life force that can be reclaimed, the taboos that can be bust through, the awakening that can happen, and that we can resolve what's in our unconscious, where the shadow lurks, and we can make our desire a place of presence as opposed to fixation, addiction, or agenda, or performance. Yeah, how was today for you? How did we do? Thank you, Adam. Leah, thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Love your email address, Stephen.
What else are you taking with you today?
Pardon me?
It's the stepping into the unknown. You know, the space of chaos is your kind of feminine principle of the expanse of everything that's possible. It's chaotic, it's mysterious, it's wonderful, and it's unknown, and yeah, it can feel intimidating. So a lot of my work has been learning to dance with that.
My first spiritual teacher said, confusion is good. Chaos is better.
As a teenager, I had this sense that if everything was going well, I should pay very big attention if there was something not right. Look out. Yeah.
Well, thank you all for dancing with us today. We're at the 2-hour mark, so we don't want to keep you any further, but we're so grateful. You can find us at our email addresses. You can learn more at sexualshadow.com and shaktishiva.academy. And Michael, I'll get to you in just one moment, but a big, huge thank you to everyone who joined. And Michael, yes, did you have a final question? Oh, unmute. Can't hear you. Can you unmute first? We can't hear you. Yeah. Thank you, sweetheart. Yes.
Since I can't read the chat, can you just tell me out loud your email address?
Yes, Claire, CLAIRE, Rumore, RUMORE, Claire Rumore @gmail.com.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for asking. Yay. All right, everyone. Before we sign off, Stephen, are there any final words you would like to pop into the pot before we sign off?
Yeah, just this emphasis of gentleness. Be really gentle. I think I said earlier, we're such beautiful beings that sometimes just to remember to be gentle, gentle. There's nothing that needs to be forced. It's all happening. It's all good. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you to you all. Thank you, Stephen.